Hi, welcome live. We're going to talk about what all is looking like speculation in the horizon for the express entry. There is so much of rumors that are going on. Now let's talk about the changes that are being proposed. Now the changes that are being proposed, and a lot of people are quite anxious about that. Yes, immigration is still open and it will continue to remain open. Canada issues 3 years immigration plan. As far as that is concerned, it's all looking hunky-dory, all positive. On the contrary, we expect the numbers to go up, the numbers to be increased, because obviously last year they did not meet the quota. So we expect that the numbers of that they wish to bring into Canada as new immigrants would increase. That is one. Number two, the last budget that was tabled, which happened after almost 2 years, I think, probably more than 2 years. There was a small paragraph which went out, which got a lot of people anxious, and which said that immigration is looking or proposing to make some changes to the express entry, whereby they can invite people based on the labor market priorities or labor market requirement. Now, fair comment, whereby obviously there is going to be a back and forth in the parliament as and when it comes up for discussion, and only after that certain changes will be made. If at all it is approved, those changes will be announced. When they will be announced, trust me, we will all know. We will be doing another of those sessions, we will be discussing about it, and then we will talk about it. But from what we understand, that the immigration minister may wish to make changes whereby they are able to invite certain categories of people from the express entry pool. Something similar to what PNPs do, something similar to what Nova Scotia does, something similar to what Alberta does, something similar to what Ontario does, as in they identify certain NOC codes, they identify certain CRS scores, and then they go out and send invitations only to those specific categories of people. This is what we understand the essence of that particular comment that has been included, or rather that particular text that has been included. Now, to what extent this is going to be defined, we don't know at this point of time. It will happen as and when it will happen. The Standing Committee's report in the House of Commons, which was up for discussion today, which is also quite interesting. I'm not sure how many of you read that, because it's quite an intensive text. There are some very interesting proposals, and I wish a lot of them would get approved as and when they would happen. Mind you, those are just recommendations. Those are not something which are, those are not the new changes or something. Those are recommendations. Now, if they are to get accepted, then we can see a lot of things. One of the recommendations amongst that was that if the applications are refused, then the visa officer should give much more detailed information as to why they're refusing the applications. As of right now, for study permit applications, visit visa applications, spouse open work permit applications, if the visas are refused, they don't really give you too much of information. So you don't really know. So you have to order GCMS notes to understand. So I hope that gets enforced. Number two, which is also very interesting, and I hope they include this, is that they wish to give a certain leeway to permanent residents who are outside of Canada and who could not travel back and could not comply with the residency obligation. So certain exemptions may be given to them. So that was another recommendation. Another very interesting recommendation which has been given was that instead of issuing PR visas on your passport, so which basically means that after you get PPR, passport request, you have to then send out your passports to the visa office. If you are from a non-visa free country, you have to send your passports to immigration, whereby they stamp it with a counterfoil with a visa, which then allows you to travel. So there is a recommendation that you just be given a bar-coded letter or a bar-coded document, which would then allow you to travel using that document, which is also pretty interesting one. It sort of saves you a lot of hassles of having to send your passport. Another one which was there was that everybody whose COPRs and PR visas had expired because they couldn't travel after the COVID restrictions, and they be allowed to come to Canada, with those extensions, everybody can get that. So there are a lot of recommendations which are quite interesting, and I hope some of them get accepted and they come out as changes, because that would make it very, very interesting. Now, what's happening with the FSW draws? And everybody wants to know that. Well, let me just explain what is going on? First of all, there are so many of you out there whose PR applications are in the pipeline and they are just stuck and you do not know what's going on. So I can understand the anxiety levels are high, very high. In such cases, you have to understand that there is an ongoing travel restriction in place, and that has been in place for almost 14 months now, probably March, April, May, yeah, about 14 months now. And it is probably going to be in force for quite some time to come. I don't expect the travel restrictions to be lifted anytime. I would say probably until at least 75% of residents in Canada have received their second dose of vaccination. Yes, so because of the COVID situation being the way it is right now in Canada, we expect the travel restrictions to continue for the time being. And because of that, it is unlikely that they will finalize COPRs or PR visas at this point of time. Why are they not finalizing? So this is what's going to happen. For the people who received their PR visas after the 18th of March, you were not allowed to travel, right? Because 18th of March was the deadline. That was the day when the order of council orders were issued or the restrictions were issued. So from that date onwards, anybody whose PR visas were issued, they were not allowed to travel to Canada. Now, if your PR visa is issued and the travel restrictions are in place and they are not going to ease up. I know there are so many people whose visas have been issued after the 18th March and they're all saying free 18th March COPRs, etc., etc. As much as it has caused so much of disruption in your life, as much as it has created so much of confusion, so much of a waiting game. And to be very honest, there is no logic behind certain things, and I'm going to talk to you about that. The travel restrictions are in place and they will continue to be in place. Even if they are going to issue your PR visas, even if they will issue your COPRs, you cannot travel at this point of time. So what's going to happen? Your PR visas are connected to your medicals, okay, and your medicals are valid for 1 year. So either they have to extend your medicals, which they are extending in most cases. Now this in such scenario, because they will extend your medicals, you cannot travel. If your PR visas expire, what is going to happen? You are then going to start asking them for extensions. As it is, their whole system is totally backlogged. There are so many things to discuss. I'm like thinking what to attack first. As of right now, because of the COVID protocols, most of the staff cannot go to the office. If they are working from home, they cannot complete so many aspects of your application because they come under very serious security and confidentiality protocols, right? So because they're working from home means their connection is open. They may not have a secured server. They may not having a secured line. So they need to be working from office for certain parts of the application. That's the first factor. In the offices, because of the COVID protocols, for example, if earlier 20 people could work from one particular office, no longer can they allow 20 people to work. So probably it's 1/3. Let's say now 7 people can work in an office that earlier 20 could work. Now they have to take turns. What is going to happen with all these additional protocols that are now into place is that the work is going to suffer, the productivity is going to suffer. So obviously they will take more time. That's number one. Number two, with this whole thing, what also has happened is that study permit applications, they did a two-way process. AIP first and then the issuing of visas. So approval in principle first, then so additional work. Then they started this new process of issuing travel authorizations. And trust me, everybody applied for travel authorizations, even if they were not eligible for it. So now again, additional people were put into those places to now start processing these applications. Every single time something new is done. Now, obviously, I'm sure a lot of you are also aware that they allowed public policy under which everybody who was in Canada with a postgraduate work permit and it was expiring, they were allowed to extend for the first time and probably the only time they were allowed to extend for 18 months. And that is valid until the 27th of July, I think. Again, so many staff have to be diverted for this new process, which wasn't earlier there. Mind you, they haven't really taken so many. They did increase the number of staff. But so the point I'm trying to make is that with all this increase in the processes, with all these additional processes which were not there, with the COVID protocols, with the work from home, with restricted access to their servers, there has been obviously tremendous amount of backlog, which they cannot handle. The applications are not being able, they cannot really process with the same speed. I mean, as it is, we were complaining earlier that they take a lot of time. Now, can you imagine how much time they would take to process the same applications? Then there have been that post 18th March. Then there have been people who had COPRs which were issued before 18th of March, but they could not travel. Then their visas expired. Then they wanted an extension. Then that was a different category of people altogether. Then, of course, the 18th March COPRs who have now expired, and they're all asking for them to be extended. So the reason why they are not giving you your PR visas, they are not issuing, is because it's so much of a headache. You can imagine, right? If they were to issue it to you right now, it expires, then you will say, please renew it. Then they will ask you to please send the passport back. They will ask you to do your re-medicals. Then they will have to check your inadmissibilities again. Then they will have to ask you to, okay, send it back to you. Then again, you will travel. Too much of hassle. The best thing to do is just hold the process at this point of time. Only issue once the travel restrictions have eased up, and then everybody can, go back to living happily ever after. So this, I hope you understand, is the reason why your PR visas are not being issued. They're under process. They're in the pipeline. They're taking so much of time. Fingers crossed, we're forever hopeful. We all want to get out of this pandemic, right? I mean, who wants to continue living with all the masks on your face and with so much of restrictions? We all want to get out of this. But I guess we also need to take into consideration that it's for the safety and security for all concerned. If you travel, you are at risk. If you travel, your family is at risk. If you travel, the people who you're coming in touch with, they are at risk. And once you come to Canada, then whoever you're interacting in Canada, they are at risk. So for everybody's safety and security, I guess the restrictions are in place. There are a lot of thought that goes behind it. So this is about the people whose PR visas, COPRs are not being issued. Now let's talk about now in this whole process, I know it is not fair. Why is it unfair? It is unfair because, one, you are allowing students to come into Canada, right? So if you're allowing students to come into Canada, then why won't you allow people who have visas after the 18th of March? Where is the logic? Because if you are going to claim safety, security, and the risk factor, then doesn't the safety, security, risk factor apply with the international students who are coming to Canada? I mean, aren't you going to be worried about their safety, security, and God forbid they being carriers of any of the virus variants? No, they don't talk about that. Secondly, what about people who are coming in from the US? They don't have any restrictions. They can just drive through the border. They can fly at any point of time. Their visas could be issued yesterday and they can fly in tomorrow. And they don't have any restrictions whether they are on TRVs, not visit visas. Visit visas are still not allowed to come into Canada unless it's for essential purposes. But if they have the PR visas issued at any point of time, they can travel. If their study visas are issued, they can travel. So why would you allow people coming in from the US? Why would you allow international students and then claim that post 18th March travel restrictions, blah, blah, blah. So I mean, as much as I understand the risk factor and all that logic that has been given, at the same time, it defies it when you say one thing at one point of time and then act contrary to that. So apply the same principle elsewhere. I mean, are you saying people coming in from US are not going to be, infecting anybody? Because that is the reason why you're giving for others, right? I mean, I wish decision makers would sort of give a logic. They don't give you the logic. They just sort of do what they have to do. Canadian education business is worth $22 billion, actually more. This is just a small, small figure that I'm talking about, because there are lots of secondary businesses, secondary industries that are also connected with the education business that also thrive and run because of the students in Canada. So definitely for students to come to Canada, I can understand that they want the students to come to Canada. But similarly, permanent residents also contribute in a large manner to the Canadian economy, and it has already been proven time and time again. That's the reason why Canada needs the immigrants. That logic has never been lost. Anyways, I mean, this discussion can go on and on and on. More and more people are interested about FSW draws. Guys, I mean, as much as I would like to tell you about the FSW draws, I don't really have any new update or new information to give you. It's the same thing. FSW draws at this point of time are looking unlikely because Canada is looking to give preference to people who are inside Canada. And the reason why they want to do that is for multiple reasons. First, to be very honest, I think, my opinion, my view, that it has a political agenda as well. And why does it have a political agenda? Is because the government has to prove that they were able to achieve their immigration target. And it is very easy to achieve the immigration target for people who are inside Canada, okay? Because half the work is already done, the assessments primarily are already done, the biometrics are in most cases already done. You just need to issue the ITA. Canadian work experience can very easily be verified. The certain criteria and factors are easily identified and assessed. And Canada has a huge domestic network. When I say domestic network, I'm talking about the visa offices. Within Canada itself, there are lots of visa offices, IRCC visa offices. When it is outside Canada, then they have to depend on, rely upon the visa offices in those respective countries where the people are based or where those people's applications are assigned. And therefore, considering the work from home, considering all the COVID protocols, it just makes it faster and easier for them to process the inland inside Canada applications. Having said that, there is also considerable delay for people who are inside Canada. It's like an ongoing thing. They have like, what was the last 8 to 12 months is what it is taking for people who are inside Canada. So it's not like people who are outside Canada are the ones who are facing delays. It's also people who are inside Canada. And the reason for that is again the backlogs. The number of new processes that I was just talking about that have come up, the new PGWP extensions and the authorization to travel requirements and the new application processing, all that is adding to the backlog and obviously the COVID protocol. So the inland candidates are not getting it through either. So how does it affect the FSW draws? Because first they want to encourage the inside Canada applicants. They want to process them because if they process them, they will be able to finalize these people faster. They will be able to achieve their immigration quota, which they could not for 2020. Remember 2020, the immigration quota was nearly 340,000 people. They got only 140, 150, not even 50%. Or I think just about 50% is what they were able to achieve. This year, they expect or rather want to be as close to the immigration quotas as possible. Therefore, 90,000 applications are going to be accepted under the TR to PR. They are trying to process as many inland applications as possible. They are trying to do whatever they can with certain other application categories. I'm sure most of you are already aware about the 27,000 ITAs that were issued in the express entry for CEC applicants. More than, I think, nearly 60,000 invitations have been issued in express entry already. Most of them to the Canadian experience class categories. So when you consider all of this, and mind you, I'm not sure how many of you have noticed the last draw, which was also for CEC, was for 4147 invitations. Now, what does that mean? What is the importance of that? You see, IRCC regulates the number of invitations that they issue based on the quota that they have for that particular year. They issue more or less depending on how many applications they want to process. The number of ITAs that are issued do not always mean that are the number of applications that will be approved. Keep in mind, a lot of people create duplicate profiles, even if it is not, acceptable. They also decline a lot of ITAs. There are a lot of applications which get rejected because they are incomplete. There are also applications that will get refused because of, different reasons. So the number of ITAs do not mean that is the number of applications which will get approved. Considering all these factors, IRCC will regulate the number of invitations they issue, more or less. Now, they started issuing 4,500, then went to 5,000, then it went to 6,000 ITAs. Then the last draw was a sudden drop to 4147. Could be possibly for two reasons. One, that they picked a specific score and said, okay, all the profiles above this score, invite them. Okay, that was one reason. Two, because 4147 doesn't add up to anything. Where did this 4147 come from? Usually they've been issuing round figures. This 4147 made a bit of a odd this thing. It could also mean they do not want the scores to go below 400. That's why they picked that particular number and issued the invitations for that. It could also mean that they now want to regulate the number of invitations they are issuing. Probably they want to save some for all program draw or FSW draws. I do not know how many of you are also familiar or are keeping an eye on the express entry pool. The number of profiles which are more than 471 are nearly 14,000. Okay, 14,000 profiles based on the pool breakdown. That's a lot of profiles. 8,195 profiles are there only between the score of 471 and 480. There are 2,990 between 481 and 490, 1,000 profiles between 491 and 500, and then you have between 501 and 600, 1,782, and then 601 to 1,200 was the 451, which is probably the PNP. Now, even if we say that some of these profiles were the CEC applicants, because obviously only CEC applicants can get such high scores depending on what their profiles are, you are looking at nearly, I would say, 10,000 profiles. Even if I remove some of them to be FSW, if some of them to be CEC, you're looking at nearly 10 to 12,000 profiles in the express entry pool, which are potentially federal skilled worker profiles. Okay. Now with the scores of 471 and above, and IRCC now coming to draw fewer invitations, that only means that as and when the scores they start drawing out, start the all program draw or the federal skilled worker program draws, the scores are going to remain high. I mean, I expect the first draw to happen at somewhere in the range of 480 plus. I mean, probably 470 high or 480 plus. That is what I would expect the first draws to come out at. From there on, even for the scores to drop, it will depend largely on how IRCC issues invitations. If they issue a lot of invitations, probably we will see faster drop. If they issue fewer invitations, we will see slower drop. That is how it's going to sort of vary. When do I expect federal skilled worker draws to resume? As I said earlier, I would probably link it to vaccination program in Canada, because that would then trigger border openings and that would then trigger a lot of other things. I would probably say somewhere towards the third quarter of this year is what I am expecting things to start changing, and that is primarily only because of the vaccination program. As of right now, I hope that vaccination program goes faster. As of right now, a lot of people have got their first dose, second shot, second jab or second dose of the vaccine. Most people haven't got it. Okay, they are only expected to get it after sort of a few months. I would expect somewhere in September when most people would have also got their second shot, or a lot of people would have got their second shot. So my expectation for this whole thing would be probably third quarter, September, give or take, a few weeks here and there. And that's what I would expect, that things start looking at some sort of sense of normalcy. Thank you for joining in. If you are not following this particular Instagram channel, I think you should, because we keep updating a lot of information here first, then it goes on to our different channels. That's all from me. I hope I sort of see you in Canada soon. You guys owe me a cup of coffee, and then I'll see you when I see you. Take care.